We're live from New Delhi. You're watching DT India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Lipakshi Khurana. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi wraps up his successful and substantial US visit, addresses Summit of the Future in New York, calls for urgent reform of the institutions of global governance, including the UN Security Council. Prime Minister Modi meets Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of UNGA, reiterates India's willingness to play a constructive role in peaceful resolution of the conflict. West Asia on edge as more than 490 killed in Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon in deadliest strike of conflict. France calls for emergency UNSC meeting. US and UK appeal for calm. Japan's remote Izu Islands hit by small tsunami after 5.9 earthquake, while hottest US city Phoenix smashes heat streak record as leaders discuss responses to the climate crisis during New York's Climate Week. On to the top story. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi implanes for home after concluding his successful and substantial three-day visit to the United States, during which he participated in the 6th Quad Leaders Summit in Wilmington, Delaware, met US President Joe Biden in his hometown, and addressed the United Nations Summit of the Future. And on the third and final day of his visit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the Summit of the Future at the United Nations in New York, calling for a primacy of human-centric approach in a collective quest for a bright global future. The Prime Minister highlighted India's success at scaling sustainable development initiatives. Prime Minister also called for urgent reform of the institutions of global governance, including the UN Security Council.
Global action must match global ambition.
The statement by India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi defines the fundamental course correction needed for a sustainable and equitable future. Prime Minister Modi arrived at the 79th UN General Assembly session to address the Summit of the Future in New York. Prime Minister said reforms are the only way forward for global peace and development.
वैश्विक शांति एवं विकास के लिए ग्लोबल संस्थाओं में रिफॉर्म्स आवश्यक है. रिफॉर्म इज द की टू रिलेवेंस.
Apart from reform of multilateral institutions and the global governance architecture, the Prime Minister strongly reiterated India's long-standing position that resolution to global conflicts can only be brought about by engaging in dialogue, sitting across the table and not on the battlefield.
सक्सेस का हमारा यह अनुभव हम ग्लोबल साउथ के साथ साझा करने के लिए तैयार है.
Prime Minister said the world must prioritize a human-centric approach. He flagged the continuing threat of terrorism and cybercrimes and advocated strengthening the global digital governance and tech regulation. He also gave an example of how India successfully lifted 250 million people out of poverty. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in his address, underlined the key threats and opportunities in the path towards sustainable future. And with its remarkable achievements in poverty alleviation and advances in digital public infrastructure, Prime Minister emphasized that India can show the way. With my colleague Amritpal Singh and camera person Sanjay Jaina, Shubhendu Ghosh for DD India at UN headquarters in New York.
Well, besides, Prime Minister Modi held a bilateral meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of the Summit of the Future in New York. The two leaders recalled Prime Minister's recent visit to Ukraine and expressed satisfaction at the continued consolidation of bilateral ties. The situation in Ukraine, as well as the way forward on pursuing a path to peace, also figured prominently in their discussions. Prime Minister reiterated India's clear, consistent and constructive approach in favor of a peaceful resolution of the conflict through diplomacy and dialogue, as well as engagement between all stakeholders. He conveyed that India remains open to provide all support within its means to facilitate a lasting and peaceful resolution of the conflict.
Their discussions on all matters, the bilateral issues as well as issues surrounding the Russia-Ukraine conflict. President Zelensky was very appreciative of India's attention to these issues and said that Prime Minister's visit had been highly appreciated, and he thanked the Prime Minister for the efforts that he was making for peace and a pathway to finding a way out of this conflict. Both sides appreciated that there was positive momentum on a lot of issues in the bilateral relationship, and they agreed to remain in close touch, either directly or through exchanges of visits at various other levels.
And besides Zelensky, the Prime Minister also met some other world leaders, including Vietnamese President, Armenian President and Secretary of State of the Holy See. PM Modi and President Lam took stock of the full range of India-Vietnam friendship. Two leaders deliberated on ways to enhance comprehensive strategic partnership, strengthen bilateral cooperation, as well as exchanged views on important regional and global issues. They also reaffirmed the importance of deep civilizational and cultural links between the two countries. Two sides look forward to adding momentum in sectors such as connectivity, trade, culture and more. PM also met Armenian counterpart Nikol Pashinyan on the sidelines of the Summit of the Future. The Prime Minister also held a great conversation with Secretary of State of the Holy See, Cardinal Pietro Parolin. The Holy See is the central government of the Catholic Church and is headquartered in Vatican City State. And briefing media about Prime Minister Narendra Modi's meeting with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri said that Prime Minister expressed a deep concern at the humanitarian crisis unfolding in Gaza and the deteriorating security situation in the region.
The Prime Minister referred to India's historic support for Palestine in the United Nations, on the international stage, as also the consistent and sustained humanitarian support that India has provided to Palestine in the fields of health, education, capacity building, and others. He also expressed deep concern at the unfolding crisis in Gaza, where the situation remains complicated and tensions remain high. And reiterated once again that only a two-state solution can deliver sustainable peace in this area. The President of Palestine thanked the Prime Minister for the assistance that India had provided, including on the political issues, and hoped that India would continue to play its role for bringing peace in the region.
Well, on Sunday, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced that India will open 2 new consulates in Boston and Los Angeles.
The community event, most of you must have watched it or you were present for it, so I won't go into the details of the event, except to say that it once again showed the kind of connect that the Indian-American community has built in the United States, and the manner in which it acts as a living bridge between our two countries. And the Prime Minister acknowledged that in his remarks. The highlights, of course, were his announcement about India's plans to open 2 new consulates in Boston and Los Angeles, and also the naming of a Thiruvalluvar chair in Tamil studies at the University of Houston.
Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also interacted with technology industry leaders in New York. Prime Minister urged CEOs of US majors to take advantage of India's growth story, urging them to grow in India, growth with India.
The extent of involvement that all of these companies already have in India, the degree to which they are enthused by the prospects in India, the policy environment in India, and their plans to continue to grow in India and grow with India for themselves and for the rest of the world. And I think that's what was really a feature of the remarks of practically every one of the CEOs, of how excited they are for their own businesses in India, especially at this moment in time when things like AI and quantum computing are changing the world as we know it.
Well, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is also in New York to attend the 79th General Debate Session of United Nations General Assembly, ahead of which he met his counterparts from the G4 countries, reaffirming the grouping's commitment to urgent reform of the United Nations Security Council through text-based negotiations. The G4 nations comprise Brazil, Germany, India and Japan. Jaishankar also met his Venezuelan counterpart on the sidelines of the session. Both the leaders discussed energy, health, economic cooperation, as well also reformed multilateralism. And on to some updates on assembly elections in India's Jammu Kashmir. After an impressive turnout of over 61% in the first phase, the Union Territory is now set for the second phase. 26 assembly constituencies will go to polls in this phase on September 25th. The second phase of the election covers the constituencies of Riyasi, Rajouri and Poonch districts in the Jammu region and Srinagar and Budgam districts of Kashmir Valley. The Jammu and Kashmir Assembly election is being conducted in 3 phases, with voting on September 18, September 25th and October 1st. The counting of votes will take place on October 8th. Assembly elections are being held for the first time in Jammu and Kashmir after the abrogation of Article 370. And now let's take a look at other stories making news today. Schools in Assam's Kamrup district will be closed from September 24th to September 27th due to excessive heat and rising temperatures. According to the district elementary education officer, the decision was taken in order to safeguard the students from the ill effects of exposure of excessive heat. As India gears up for the festive mode, people practice Garba, the traditional dance of Gujarat, ahead of Navratri in Ahmedabad. Navratri is one of the most important Hindu festivals that is celebrated all over the world and offer prayers to Hindu goddess Durga. And still to come in this edition of DD India Live. IAEA Chief Grossi says situation remains serious around Russia's Kursk nuclear power plant. Amid tight campaigning between Harris and Trump ahead of November elections, Trump visited a local grocery store to check on inflation, blaming his rival. Rafael Nadal named in Spain's squad for the Davis Cup.
Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. Hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium. We'll get you centered with the economic brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Lipakshi Khurana, and moving on, Israel's large-scale airstrikes across Lebanon resulted in more than 492 deaths and over 1,500 wounded as thousands of people in the south of the country fled for safety. Israel's army has said it launched more than 650 attacks on some 1,300 Hezbollah targets across Lebanon over the past 24 hours. Israeli warplanes conducted intensive raids in southern and eastern Lebanon, forcing thousands of residents from the cities to flee towards Beirut and Mount Lebanon. Also on Monday, Israeli airstrikes in Beirut targeted Ali Karki, a senior Hezbollah commander. Later, Hezbollah issued a statement claiming that Karki is safe. In response to the Israeli attacks, Hezbollah fired over 150 rockets towards northern Israel throughout Monday. Since the 8th of October 2023, Hezbollah and the Israeli army have been exchanging fire across the Lebanese-Israeli border amid fears of a broader conflict. Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sent a short video statement addressed to the Lebanese people. Netanyahu urged the people of Lebanon to get out of harm's way now.
People of Lebanon, Israel's war is not with you. It's with Hezbollah. For too long, Hezbollah has been using you as human shields. It placed rockets in your living rooms and missiles in your garage. Those rockets and missiles are aimed directly at our cities, directly at our citizens. To defend our people against Hezbollah strikes, we must take out those weapons. Now, starting this morning, the IDF has warned you to get out of harm's way. I urge you, take this warning seriously. Don't let Hezbollah endanger your lives and the lives of your loved ones. Don't let Hezbollah endanger Lebanon. Please, get out of harm's way now. Once our operation is finished, you can come back safely to your homes.
Also, world leaders and the United Nations called for urgent de-escalation, with France calling for emergency UN Security Council meeting on Lebanon. France's Foreign Minister Jean-Noel Barrot told the UN General Assembly on Monday that it has requested that an emergency meeting of the Security Council be held on Lebanon this week. Barrot said these strikes conducted on both sides of the blue line must immediately end.
I commend the work of Blue Helmets. Each day they work for security and peace around the world. I am thinking of the men and women in Lebanon and the French continent there. These strikes conducted on both sides of the blue line and in the region more broadly must end. France once again calls on the parties and those that support them to de-escalate and avoid a regional conflict that would be devastating for everyone. For that reason, I have asked for an emergency meeting on Security Council on Lebanon this week.
Well, the United States has also called for de-escalation, with a spokesperson saying that the United States does not support a cross-border escalation between Israel and Hezbollah, and that Washington was going to discuss concrete ideas with allies and partners to prevent the war from broadening. The United Nations interim force in Lebanon has expressed grave concern for the well-being and safety of civilians and reiterated its strong call for a diplomatic solution.
I can tell you that the Secretary General is indeed alarmed by the escalating situation along the blue line. He's very concerned about the large number of civilian casualties being reported by the Lebanese authorities, as well as the thousands of displaced persons amidst the most intense exchange of fire across the blue line since October of last year. He expresses grave concern for the safety of civilians, both in southern Lebanon and in northern Israel, as well as the UN staff in those areas.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has reaffirmed that no member state has the right to redraw borders by force. He was speaking at the United Nations Summit of the Future. He added that we will not accept efforts to tear down, dilute or fundamentally alter the core principles of the UN Charter, that are sovereignty, territorial integrity and independence.
We will not accept efforts to tear down, dilute, or fundamentally alter the core principles of the UN Charter: sovereignty, territorial integrity, independence. We will continue to affirm that no member state has the right to redraw borders by force or repress their own people. We'll continue to oppose the idea that nations can assert spheres of influence or dictate who other countries ally or partner with.
While UN Nuclear Agency Chief Rafael Grossi has said that the situation remained serious around Russia's Kursk nuclear power plant. Ukrainian troops remained in Russia's southern Kursk region after pouring over the border last month, but remained some 40 kilometers from the facility. Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Grossi, visited the Kursk plant, made up of 4 reactors, last month and said it would be extremely exposed if it came under attack, as the facility had no containment dome. He also said that IAEA had no plans to station observers permanently at the station, including the Zaporizhzhia station. Grossi has visited the Zaporizhzhia station 5 times since the invasion and urged both sides to show restraint to guard against any nuclear accident. And former U.S. President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris are campaigning in battleground states this week as they race to make their pitch to the voters. Donald Trump made an impromptu visit to a local grocery store in the crucial 2024 election swing state of Pennsylvania, commiserating with staff about inflation, which he blamed on his Democratic rival Kamala Harris.
We're going to win the election. We're going to turn the country around. We're going to get energy prices way down. That's going to bring other prices way down. And we're going to take care of crime. We're going to stop the crime. And we're going to deport the criminals that have been brought into our country.
Well, in Pennsylvania, one of 7 critical battleground states, Harris maintained her 4-point advantage, leading 50% to 46% with a margin of error of plus or minus 3.8 percentage points, according to the Times poll. And Japan's remote Aizu Island south of Tokyo were hit by a small tsunami on Tuesday with no immediate reports of damage after a magnitude 5.9 earthquake occurred near an unpopulated island farther south in the Pacific Ocean. A tsunami of 50 centimeters reached Hachijou Island, one of the Aizu Islands, about 40 minutes after the earthquake. Japan sits on top of 4 major tectonic plates and experiences around 1,500 quakes every year, most of them minor. The impact is generally contained even with larger tremors, thanks to advanced building techniques and well-practiced emergency procedures. The desert city of Phoenix, Arizona suffered a record 113 straight days with temperatures over 38 degrees Celsius this year, breaking previous record of 76 days of over set in 1993. Leaders at climate meetings in New York warn of growing mistrust between nations as a result of human-led climate change. Heat has killed over 256 people so far this year in Phoenix, Maricopa County, and is the suspected cause of 393 other deaths. The county had a record 645 heat deaths last year. Well, the Climate Week in New York City kicked off as the world leaders started gathering. It's a platform for showcasing leading climate action and discussing how to do more. Climate Week, which starts at the same time as the United Nations General Assembly, will include hundreds of events across Manhattan. Azerbaijan is due to host a 2-week UN Climate Summit in November that would typically be the biggest moment on the calendar. But COP29 is expected to draw far fewer business executives and bankers than last year's COP28 event in the financial hub of Dubai. And in sports, Rafael Nadal has been named in Spain's squad for the Davis Cup Final 8 in November, joining forces with Carlos Alcaraz, Roberto Bautista Agut, Pablo Carreño Busta and Marcel Granollers. The 38-year-old former world #1 has not competed since the Paris 2024 Olympics, where he was beaten by Novak Djokovic in singles and exited the doubles in the quarter-finals with his partner Alcaraz. Nadal withdrew from the US Open and Laver Cup due to fitness concerns. Spain's 6-time Davis Cup champions will face the Netherlands in the quarter-finals starting on 19th of November. And L'Oreal hosted the 7th edition of its star-studded fashion show in Paris with celebrities Aishwarya Rai, Alia Bhatt, Jane Fonda, Kendall Jenner veiled the runway that celebrated women and inclusivity. This year's Paris Fashion Week was held at the iconic Place de l'Opéra. Among the women on the catwalk this year were Viola Davis and Andie MacDowell. Well, that's all for this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Lipakshi Khurana from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live.